o'clock, everyone, so we'll start the recording. And because Patrick had issues that he couldn't make the meeting, I will be chairing. So I will call the meeting of the Public Safety Committee of January 22nd, 2025 to order. And I assume you've gotten the roll call?
Yes, sir.
So we could look at the minutes from October 23rd, 2024. If someone wants to make a motion of approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, I believe. Did you get that?
That was Joe or Mark and Joe. Okay,
I was
and
first.
Angela.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any comments, suggestions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any nays or abstentions? Sounds like it's unanimous. Unfinished business, none. We'll come to the heart of the meeting here. New business, and that's why we have a guest with us today. Neil Steck-Schulte, our city administrator and our emergency operations manager, or what do you want to call it?
Yeah, I think is it emergency management?
Emergency manager.
Manager is the
Okay.
official one, yeah. So-
Okay, emergency manager.
Alder, before he does, please allow me, I just want to note for the record, there are no appearances, and
Yep.
nobody has
Oh.
registered to speak. I just
Sorry.
want to put that on record. Right?
Yeah, no, thanks for catching that. Okay. I will turn the mic over to you and you can tell us about your draft plan.
Perfect, thank you, everybody, so appreciate everybody coming out tonight, to this document, you guys are probably more familiar with these types of documents even than certainly than I am, so one of the reasons we're getting this out to you is we're looking for feedback, anything in terms of extra information you feel would be helpful in here, anything else that you think might be missing that we should take a look at. Just to give you a little background, we essentially started with I think the original format was also provided by Dane County Emergency Management originally, so we started with that original plan. And looked at a lot of that information that was there. I think it was just this last fall, Chief, was it, when we attended the training that they handed out the new template, so to speak?
Yes, I believe that's right. Jerry's shaking his head in the affirmative.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of when they provided that. So we started off, we're certainly looking at the original document and just wanting to update that information. Then we got the new template out. But it didn't include some of the things that were in the old document that we still thought were kind of useful or at least applicable. So we kind of did a hybrid and merged the two formats together. So that's kind of what you'll see before you here. That was a couple of little nuances that you probably won't see in other documents, including the chief's all the reference to the reunification efforts that he's been undertaking. So if I might as well put that in here as well in terms of assigning just that as a checklist. But so obviously this is essentially, when it's referred to as an emergency operations plan, what it really is kind of almost more of a manual for a checklist for responsibilities and duties by individual staff assignments when a certain incident may happen. It's also an identification of resources, not only in terms of people, but also of equipment. So how it would be from fire apparatus to public works vehicles, extra consultants and contractors we work with outside, from electricians to plumbers to whatever else we might need, to try to identify and keep all of that information in one useful document is the idea, I think, behind really by doing these. So we've kind of tried to merge those two formats together. There's a couple of areas you see, like in terms of the maps that are certainly, there's placeholders in there for the maps right now. Our GIS guy, Brad, can make those. Kind of difficult. They're really kind of just be a reference that, like, yeah, we have the map. 8.5 by 11 for the entire city is not going to help us too much on that. But in terms of, kind of how confirming we have that data and it's available, and then having it in other formats, larger ones available. I think part of the other important part of this document is actually how it's going to be distributed. So we're going to certainly have PDF versions available, probably even online, as well as on our shared drive. With the, you'll notice like certain cell phone information is blocked out in this document for public review, so they can see that. But then also making sure that individual staff has a PDF document, either as on a flash drive, or as well as a hard copy that they can keep with them in a vehicle or in an office. So making sure we've got this thing replicated enough times that it's available if something happens and somebody needs that. So, and I think the last thing that's the important part is obviously keeping this updated. I think, things like certainly like the equipment lists and even the media contacts, and those things have a tendency to change pretty quickly. Annually is not exactly probably close to keeping it current, but I think a couple of things we can even take a look at even quarterly and just do a quick run through and make sure we've got things updated and current on there. So just kind of look at, kind of identify the very basic information of here, just the individual checklists kind of by department and by individual staff. The map resources we're planning to include. The one thing we also need to note on like things like the community facilities map and the public utilities and infrastructure map, those will not be in the public document for security reasons, obviously, and certainly since 9/11, that's been pretty much a standard requirement. So we'll have those available, but they'll be available by reference. So we're kind of be looking at some of those things there. So really, it's those checklists are really those attachments are really the kind of the areas where we really did a lot of the updating of information. A lot of the standard items up on the top, I think that's pretty standard from what the original checklist and the model template that was provided by Dane County was on there. So I certainly don't want to go through this page by page, but if anyone has any specific questions on anything, would certainly be happy to try to answer them. Again, looking for questions, any other suggestions on other information or references that you think might be useful for here, would certainly appreciate any feedback.
Yeah.
From the committee, so.
I have a couple. There was one reference, I can't find it exactly, but where people might need to stay if they've been lost their housing.
Yep.
And I wondered to what extent the hotels in the immediate area might be worth listing.
We certainly could put their contact information out there, Alder, absolutely. I think in terms of what probably even be better is to make sure that we actually have contacted them and saying, hey, if we have a situation, is it okay if we send them your way? And they would probably just actually have that formal contact with them so that they know.
Right.
That would probably be the recommended step, I would think.
And I will say, I'll chime in. Fire deals with this, if not more than we do, but we help facilitate this too. It's just getting a hold of the Red Cross.
Yeah.
Right, who takes a good chunk of that responsibility once we
Right.
request them.
Right.
And they have a whole list of organizations, hotels, people that can house people in need.
That makes sense.
But we can, if we find that spot, Alder, we can maybe reference that specifically. This is the Red Cross is our preferred contact.
Yeah,
Facilitate
that would make
we can
sense
certainly add
because that's they're in place now.
Yep, absolutely.
It seems like they mostly go to St. Stephen's. The past couple fires, they've been housed there, but it could be a larger group of people.
And certainly depends on the duration, if it's, if it's one or 2 days versus multiple weeks if you have a serious apartment fire like we've had in the city before.
Yeah.
Folks can be displaced for an extended amount of time, so
Exactly.
having that Red Cross, I would agree with the chief, is good for the immediate short term as well as transitioning into something longer if they have to.
Yeah.
They'd probably be our best resource for that.
Yeah, Brian, the Red Cross has a variety, a list of different shelter capabilities, and it depends kind of on the fire and what kind of population and all of that, and what happens to be open at the time or people are willing to share at the time. We've been at La Follette, we've been all over the place, but they make that decision. And then in the fires, especially there are a variety of hotel options at certain points, depending on the number of people and if there are pets or not.
Yeah, I noticed pets were mentioned in the report.
These days especially.
We talk about that regularly. I don't want to step on the chief's toes here, but people will not leave in some instances if they know that their pet is still in the place of hazard, right? And so by helping to facilitate a place where it's pet friendly or their pets can go temporarily will help us in addressing the emergency.
Yeah, makes sense.
My wife would be one of those people. She would throw me back into the fire if I didn't come out with the dogs, yeah, so.
Oh, yeah, you have 3, right?
Yeah, exactly, so. Kind of know my place, that's all.
Any other questions or comments? I guess my question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, there's just a couple of things. I don't know if these are too picky or not, but I'm just kind of going through, looking at stuff here. I've never seen a misinformation center. You know about that, I mean.
We've actually had
What was it called?
a misinformation center.
Oh, wow.
Where as part of our communications plan, personally, I experienced this in my days in Sun Prairie. I was working as the economic development director when the natural gas explosion had happened.
Okay.
Just from a panic standpoint and people just making assumptions, or somebody just says something out loud and it gets taken, it runs, especially with social media these days, having someone kind of keeping an eye on that as part of your overall communication strategy is kind of an important thing these days. Even to say something, oh, everything's fine, you can go back. No, you can't. It's, it's we find it takes it a lot. It's usually underestimate the amount of energy and effort it actually takes to do that. So I think by at least identifying it up front, it's just kind of reminds our communication staff that like, hey, we're going to need to make sure that these are the reliable sources. This is the timing of how we're getting information out. Don't take it secondhand. Confirm it here. Making sure we have a strategy to make sure that the people are getting accurate information from the proper sources. So that's a great question, actually.
Well, and then from the proper sources, I get a little, there's a PIO involved. I don't know if you have one, chief or fire department, has one, but then there's also the community media director. Is there some redundancy there?
For most parts in an emergency situation, we're going to default to the chief in terms of what the message is and when it needs to go out. My community media director will then help get that disseminated out to not only our local channels, but then also to the regular media distribution list or any other, our social media, our website, our alerts that we can use and kind of helping process and send the message out. But the actual content and timing of the message, we're going to probably rely on the chief or me, whoever we kind of designate as in charge.
Two sources of information, and I don't know if it's, you've worked in a major situation, is it get confusing if you got two different people are going.
Yeah, I mean, it really can. I mean, in terms of, the other thing is in terms of it's actually the frequency of and the nature of the information you want to share. Like, I think we've had some people say, we need to know what's going on and why every minute as soon as it happens. Well, actually, no. That can actually cause more problems, especially if it's a fluid situation that's changing. So having a measured, certainly a regularly frequent, schedule, like every hour on the hour or every 2 hour, in an emergency situation, having a fixed general update. There's the initial emergency response that, you get out quick fire as soon as you can get things out. But as soon as you start to get everything established, they're getting it down to a more measured, predictable response type and schedule. It just helps avoid.
Leaders are always giving these press conferences. And like, how are they pitching when they're always standing and
Yeah.
Jerry, I'm sure will chime in here too. We would probably stand up a joint information center, JIC, and then that would help facilitate a lot of that coordination and movement. Jerry?
Agreed. So any type of disaster that's big enough that we're going to activate that emergency operations plan, it's going to be a unified command between police and fire. I've already publicly stated that in cases like that, the police chief is going to take precedence there. We have a unified command, but we speak with a single voice. So if it's a big enough citywide event, if that ends up being Neil, that's cool. He's going to be part of the unified command. But that way, I'm not putting out stuff, and Brian's not putting out stuff, and then Neil comes out and puts out stuff. It'll all come out from a single source.
I mean, if it's certainly like in your example, if it's still kind of in that initial emergency response where the chiefs need to be on the ground taking care of business, whatever's going on, that I would see probably me temporarily filling in. And so they're like, Neil, get that out, go.
Right.
They send me off, I fire up the website, I get the email out and take care of that, or I work with Will Nemo to help get that information out. The two of us work on that. So the chiefs can keep on top of whatever situation they're dealing with. Now, eventually we get to a point, not that I'm not sexy as a city administrator, but they're going to want to hear from the chief eventually, or Jerry, both you guys eventually when things have settled down, is under control. Probably they will be the voice of that. Well, certainly the media will want to talk to, but so I think it'd be a little fluid. But I think in terms of those types, it's a critical emergency situation. I'm going to follow the chief's lead on what he would like us to do on that, and then as it settles down, we'll kind of get more into more regular communications on that.
Two more things. Instead of going through this, do we have like backup command post? I mean, you can't. I mean, a tornado comes through and wipes out this area here. I mean, And I don't have to know where they are or whatever, but I know the city does have some backup places for dispatch and stuff. I'm assuming those are in place.
Yes, we rely on our, well, chiefs and I, our counterparts, just like we offer our spaces.
Oh, so
and
you go like
resources in need.
McFarland or whatever,
Correct.
so, okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Good question.
And it's just kind of, I don't know if this is feasible or not, but I'm thinking about if something comes through and I'm a traffic officer and you've got people coming up wanting to volunteer, which has come up in these meetings before about how that could be a problem
Yeah.
legally, or, would there be a way to have, like, if I was this officer at an intersection, hey, can I help, or what's going on or whatever, to have pre-made, like laminated cards that say, here's the website, here's the Instagram account or whatever, check it out, so now I'm not explaining, well, our email address is so-and-so or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, if that would be a
We do
handy
have-
tool to have.
We do that, someplace in one of these, chief, I remember, we actually have a volunteer coordinator, I think, identified
Correct,
as
as
part
an
of that.
assignment, but the Red
Yeah.
Cross also helps facilitate that
Yeah.
too, and helps with vetting as well.
Yeah. I can see some
Yeah.
public works guy out there trying to clear a tree and people are coming up and or whatever, just to
Yeah.
So I just thought that might be-
Let's have something standard as a
some
easy.
standards so
Yeah,
they can help them acknowledge, hey, we appreciate it, but I got this tree I gotta get out of the way.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, go follow this, here's the city's Facebook page, here's the city's website, here's the, I think that's actually,
That's a good idea.
that's a good idea.
And,
That's all.
and also to address your comment about backup command centers, the county does have two available. So CV1 is their main command post vehicle. So if City Hall gets hit, we can request CV1 to come out and stand up a temporary command center here. Longer term, yes, we'd rely on our neighbors to help with that. But in the short term, the county does have command post vehicles available for us to use.
That is an important aspect of it, because I think even in that Sunbury incident, they had to move that response center like 3 times. They just started to get set up, they're like, well, no, we a little too close still, so, but fortunately, they had it down to the fact of moving it was not a problem, but it was, having some preset areas to have that set up is certainly a good idea.
I was curious, what is the trigger? It can be a city emergency declared by the mayor, but then we can respond if there's an emergency at a larger framework. And we have to declare our own emergency, but those triggers come from any level of government.
Yeah, I think so. And certainly, like I said, in terms of conducting, Jerry's point about unified command is, there's if it's anything that's not quite falls into the normal list of things we would kind of be prepared to deal with here. It's probably a quick conference between
I mean,
the mayor,
declaring the
that's what I mean,
emergency.
and saying,
Yeah.
hey, do we need to do this or not? So essentially declaring the emergency is really, it's activating the emergency operations center.
Okay,
Is really that's the functional result of the declaration, essentially.
okay,
Is that by doing that, there's certainly some other benefits and things to do that later on, but getting a point that's serious enough where we need to do that and basically mobilize all the folks on these lists. That's probably a call for the chiefs and probably certainly information with the mayor to say, hey,
Okay.
we need to get going on this. This
Okay.
is serious enough. We need to mobilize resources.
okay, so any one of you could kind of convene the group and make a decision.
Most likely often coming through Jerry or Brian for sure,
Okay,
but
Yeah, operationally, I think Jerry and I are naturally going to get the wheels going.
Yeah.
And then obviously we answer to the mayor, who's the chief executive officer, and the city administrator who helps facilitate the operations. We would just do that in consultation and with approval, right?
Right.
So we would in essence say, we need X, Y, and Z in order for us to do our jobs for this emergency, we're requesting X. And I venture to say that that's likely going to happen. Now, in your role as council, there may be actions that you'll be able to take in supporting of that event, in support of that event that might help, for example, free up resources that are needed, or clear the way to do some ordinance changes that may allow for certain things to take to be in effect.
Yeah.
The one thing that comes to mind for me, which is a horrible example, but it's a real life example, was a civil unrest that I went through and lived through in my previous assignment at Madison, where it involved emergency declarations and the mayor declaring curfew, and we can go back and forth on if that worked or not.
Right.
But we say it's a natural disaster, and experiences like California right now is going through where there's declared curfews. for safety reasons. That only lasts for so long per statute, and that would have to be reaffirmed by council.
Hmm,
So that's where your
Yes.
role would come into play as a
Okay.
elected official.
got it. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for doing this, Neil.
Yeah, well,
Very
this-
well put together. Very well put together.
Thank you, Angel. We'll give thanks to the county. They gave us a pretty good template to start with.
And training.
Yeah, and training, yeah, exactly. We've sat through several sessions on what they're looking for, and certainly, obviously, we'll be coordinating and sharing this with them and making sure that it's got what they need as well too, so. It's a handy document to have, that's
Yeah.
for sure,
It's
so.
good to have in your hip pocket.
But if anybody, as we move forward on this, if you see of anything or if you think of anything, certainly please email either the chiefs or me directly. Or like I said, this is meant to be kind of a resource, so if we miss something, let's fix it, get it in there. We don't have to wait until once a year or once every 5 years to revisit this. If you think of something else, by all means, certainly let us know.
Well, I hope you connect with Larry Reed.
Yeah, hopefully,
Mhm.
we'll reach out to Larry if Chief doesn't hear from him. Here, we'll follow up with him. Yeah, I agree. If he had any comments, I would sure appreciate
I would
those.
think you
Absolutely.
would, this is something close to the start.
Yeah.
Great, well, thank you.
Alder, per ordinance, the Public Safety Committee is charged to review and make recommendations to council. So that's what standing is,
Right.
action item.
So I think when I talk to Neil, we have a choice. We can either review and recommend to the council today, or we can might take more time and look at the document over the next month until our next meeting. I understand from
And there's-
Neil, there's,
Because as far as I'm aware, either Chief, there is no like immediate deadline. We have to get this done, but
so what
technically
is,
we can use this information right now.
We're
Right, yeah,
operating.
right.
Yeah, right.
it's a living document.
Right.
So if people want more time to look at it, and wait till next month, that's one option, or if people are comfortable with what's here and they're ready to take a vote to make a recommendation, we can do that too.
I guess my question on that is, does it help to wait to talk to Larry and then channel Larry's feedback through a motion to package it all up with what we said?
We can do it that way, that might be
Yeah,
one
it's a
way to
subject
do it.
matter expert on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why would we not?
Okay.
Well,
utilize
that's
them?
why you got on this committee in the
Yeah,
first place,
yeah.
was to make one years ago.
Right, I like that suggestion, and I think I've seen some heads nod, so I think,
Maybe just
do we need to vote to wait till, no, we'll just put it on the
Just hold-
agenda next
hold
month.
until next month. Yeah, that's fine. And they said, well, if Chief, you don't hear from Larry, we can certainly go out and reach
Yep.
out to him, so.
Jerry has that connection from the fireside, so I'll defer to him.
I
Okay,
will drop him a text and have him follow up directly with you, Neil.
Perfect, yeah, and yeah, you just email me, or if he wants to get together for whatever he needs, Jerry, I'm happy to meet with him too, so.
Absolutely.
okay. Well, you're welcome to stay. Here are our reports.
I'm gonna go home, shovel some snow. So. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
Our first report is from fire.
Well, good evening, everybody. I apologize not being there in person. I'm up in the beautiful city of Green Bay, attending the annual Wisconsin EMS conference. So we've had a lot of cold, but not a lot of snow. So I hear you're getting a little bit more snow down there than what we're getting
Yeah,
up. So,
Right now,
we still have all the cold though, so I would almost rather have a little snow.
Right.
Just a few items. Everybody's aware we had a big fire Monday evening. Came in right as I was actually leaving the office to drive up to Green Bay, so I diverted and went to that fire instead. Very difficult fire to access and extinguish. It was in the lower parking level of 3825 Monona Drive. Lots of good help by our neighbors. Madison sent several trucks. McFarland sent trucks. Maple Bluff brought a truck. We have ended up with 2 injuries from that fire that were found after the fact from our staff, both very minor, but both being followed up on to make sure they don't turn into something more major. We transported 1 person from the scene. not directly related to the fire. They were having a medical emergency, and one of our ambulances on scene transported them to a local hospital. Cause is going to remain undetermined. The vehicle had catastrophic damage to it. We are positive of the origin of the fire, which is that vehicle. But as for what started it, the damage is so severe, there's no determining or ruling out items because of how bad the damage is. I did hear this afternoon that power is back on at 3825. They were working feverishly this afternoon to get the heat back on because it uses a boiler system. But so far it seems pretty positive. I spoke with a couple of the residents there this afternoon and that had reached out for the incident number and got some feedback from them that the apartment ownership group has been working very hard to get folks back into the apartment. So they were hoping that they might be able to do it today. If not today, then tomorrow, to get everybody back into their apartments. Red Cross did a fabulous job. We have 80 units in that building, so having that many folks displaced in this bad of weather that we were having at that time, Red Cross did a great job. Our police department, what a fabulous job. They were on scene shortly before I was. They made a very strong effort at trying to control the fire. It was just too well seated. And then the smoke started banking down, so I had to order them out of the building, but they also helped with evacuating folks and shutting down Monona Drive so we could get water. So overall, it went very well. It was just a very long, drawn-out fire trying to get to the fire itself. The only true access is from the south garage door. Smoke, the vehicle, we believe, based on the registration on it and looking it up, was diesel, so it created an awful lot of really heavy black smoke. Our folks did a great job. Madison did a great job. Maple Bluff did a great job. So I can't speak highly enough. We had 11 volunteers respond at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is amazing. And they all worked well into the evening. It wasn't until after 9 o'clock before everybody went home. Other good news that I'll just touch on briefly, the GEMT program that the state has been waiting on federal approval to move forward with it was actually approved at the federal level last week. So all the hurdles in place have actually been removed at this point. So we're expecting the full rollout by March of this year, and it will be retroactive back to January 1st, 2023. And just a quick overview, that's a state program that is an expenditure program where they basically bill private insurance or private ambulance services for every transport that they do in the state of Wisconsin. For every transport, they have to contribute 2% into this fund. And then any publicly owned ambulance services, such as ours, can submit our data to the state saying, hey, we had 220 Medicaid transports last year. Here's how much it costs us to do that transport. Here's what we got paid by the federal government, and they'll make up that shortfall. So it'll be a lump sum payment every year based on the number of Medicaid transports that we have. So we will get 2 lump sum payments this year, one for 2023 and one for 2024. So I just spoke with the DHS staff up here at the conference. They were elated that the federal government finally approved the program. It's been up there for almost a year, but it has been approved, and we should be moving forward with that pretty quick.
That's great news.
Last 2 things I've got, we're in the middle of a full-time hiring process. We had 2 full-time staff resign at the end of last year. One of them got their dream job in Oregon. They got a job offer down in Oregon, so they left, and they were very, very transparent about their process, and we at least made it difficult for them. It took them a good week to make the decision whether to take it or not, because they do enjoy running here. And they did stay on as an LTE, so they're going to be able to help us cover additional days. The second one resigned with little notice, gave me 2 weeks, and That I won't speak about any further. It's more of a personnel issue, but we have so far got 5 applicants, which is double the number of applicants we got last time. I'm actually advertising. Got some custom lanyards made for the folks that we have up here at WEMSA, and everybody's wearing them along with the QR code. So if somebody's interested, we can get them the application right away. Cost a total of $12. So cheap advertising at the biggest EMS conference in the state. That process closes January 31st. Joe, I think we've got the meeting set up for February 24th for the Police and Fire
Yep.
Commission for interviews.
That's correct. Yep.
With the idea that we'd get them started in the first part of March. I can tell you that of the candidates that we've got several good candidates already, including 2 that would fit in very, very quickly. They're already Dane County trained. They're already certified by MEP as paramedics. So it's a much faster turnaround to get them up and running. But we have got several good candidates, and I expect to see a few more coming in. We'll also be doing a volunteer process. They're actually doing interviews starting tonight. Normally it would be in this lovely room that you folks are in, but they're in the admin conference area. So they've got 3 or 4 interviews tonight and 3 or 4 tomorrow night, and I think 5 on Monday, with the goal of bringing six new volunteers on.
I ran into one of your applicants in the hall.
Yep, they were instructed to wait in the hallway until they came to be collected for the interviews. So letting the membership committee deal with that. They've done a very good job in the past, and hopefully we'll get them on board probably mid-February to get them started. So other than that, I'm having my best day ever, even if it was 47 below zero in Green Bay yesterday.
Oh my Lord.
So unless anybody has any questions, I will happily defer to the police chief for his update.
Any questions?
I just want to, yes, I'm sorry. I should have waited till I was called on. Just want to thank you as a Monona Lakeview resident, a couple of buildings down. Thank you to everyone for all your support, assistance. It was very much appreciated.
Well, we appreciate all the folks that were actually out there. The residents are part of that. We've had a very good relationship with many of the residents in the Lakeview apartments. It's a fantastic group of people, and wish we could have got it out faster, but I say it was a bear to get to. So hopefully we can get everybody back into their apartments pretty quick here.
Was it in the corner of the garage, or what exactly?
The very far north end of the parking garage, within about 3 stalls of the end. So it was, and between the heavy smoke and the fact that it was shielded by other vehicles, even thermal imaging didn't work. Our folks got turned around in the smoke. Even Madison got turned around in the smoke. There was just no heat signature to follow. And it's a really long stretch of hose when you're going in blind. So we eventually found it with 2 different hose lines. And
did the garage prevent your equipment from getting in? Was that?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very low ceiling. Even the brush truck won't fit in there.
Wow. Well, that's probably an issue with all those buildings?
Yes.
Because
They're all limited access.
Wow.
But
Not much you can do.
the experience of this fire, we've already reviewed it once. We did a review last night before training. We're actually going to do a formal debriefing tomorrow. And we've got some really good ideas on should it occur again on other things that we can try. And again, and until you run into an experience like this, then there's all kinds of different things you can try in the future to mitigate it a little bit easier.
Connie?
Did they bring in a bus at all for the people, seeing it was so cold?
We requested one early. Unfortunately, because it was a federal holiday, there were no buses available.
Oh.
Thankfully, the group that owns the apartments, we basically moved everybody over to 3819. And then there were several that were also in their vehicles, but that had been parked outside of the apartment building. But 3819 held a lot of the folks, and that's where Red Cross did a lot of their work. So,
but most people who want to are now back in that building.
I cannot confirm that. I
Okay.
can confirm the power is back on. They were working to get the heat up and running because they won't move people until they have the heat back up and running.
Oh,
But
okay.
they were going to try and get that done this afternoon. I don't know if they did or not. They thought if it wasn't this afternoon, it'd be tomorrow morning. So
Okay. Great. Any other questions? Thank you, Jerry. Stay warm.
absolutely.
Stay inside, stay warm. How about you, Chief? You want to make a report today?
Yeah, thank you, Alder. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. It's been a couple of months since we've had the chance to convene as a committee, so it's great seeing you. I think most of you keep tabs either on social media or through the local media in regards to police activity and some of the press releases that I've produced or some of the Q&As that a couple of you have reached out and wondered what was this activity or that. So if there's anything that you have a question on, please do feel free, and this applies to any resident, feel free to give us a call. Obviously, if it's in the heat of the moment, you see a lot of police activity out there, understand that we may be busy addressing the issue and that there's a high likelihood that we're going to put information out. We try to do that with when there's a lot of police related activity. But that said, if there's a question or inquiry, please reach out. If you weren't aware, and I've tried to be very delicate with this council, I've mentioned this at council, they're aware, which means public is aware. I've declined a couple of media interviews because I just to be candid, I want the healing and recovery process of the Abundant Life Christian School and the tragedy that happened there to be paramount and first. But I think it's important for you all as residents to know and appreciate the fact that your officers were quite literally one of the first officers who have entered the school. They were first to assemble, the first to enter the school along with the Dane County deputy. They're the first to access the hallway. They're the first to walk into the classroom, which the incident took place. The first to render aid to the survivors. The first to identify those who did not. The first to discover the weapon that was used. I say that because obviously there's a healing process that is taking place not only with those impacted, the survivors, their families, and those who lost loved ones, but also the your first responders who went into the building. Last year, the chief and I believe it was last year, Chief, we switched to a new EAP provider that is specifically geared towards addressing the mental health needs of first responders. And the chief and I, after consulting with our staff who identified that there's perhaps a desire to make this switch, agreed quickly that it was in our best interest to do that. And so we worked with the city administrator, Leah Kimmel, who helps facilitate our EAP contract, and we switched over just police and fire to this very focused mental health provider that caters to and understands the creatures that we are as first responders. I call us creatures affectionately, but we're different in the sense of in regards to the trauma that we're exposed to on a regular basis. And I'll just speak for police. The number one cause of death for police officers in this country is suicide, and suicide by their own firearm. I experienced this with a colleague at Madison who committed suicide. And as somebody that I think I'm comfortable saying this, wasn't really on anybody's radar in terms of suicidal ideation. So it's something that the chief and I talk regularly about is self-care. We share, our own personal experiences, our own personal struggles and recovery and trauma that we experience in our careers. And know that your officers, your staff, they're being supported. And I would like to give credit to Madison, who has done a fabulous job in extending their services and their support, recognizing that your Monona officers were some of the first on scene and were some of the first who experienced some significant exposure to the tragedy. Every single officer, every single one of your officers who went into that building have school-age children. And so as you can imagine, that impact. So I will say that we will be participating in whatever process and after action process that Madison Police are going to conduct. We have immediately day following, because Madison does not have body worn cameras, we immediately made that available to our to Madison Police commanders and their lead detectives so that they can get a snapshot as to what the officers experienced who was where and what. That is critical in an investigation, and we were able to provide that video image to the Madison Police Department, which they were very appreciative of. So we have, we're working through that, and like I think the rest of us in this community, I think many people know of somebody who either went to school there, who's got kids there, who teaches there, et cetera. It's a mile and a half away from us, if that. And so there's a lot of ties with that school community and this community. So the day of, as this was happening, in coordination with our own school resource officer, who obviously called me and says, hey, what do you want me to do here? Because we had resources going to assist Madison. We were also pulling in resources to cover Monona, right? To make sure that we still provided police services for Monona. That was a team effort. McFarland came to help. Dane County came in to help. But in essence, we became one big East Side police organization. And so I had gotten a formal request from Chief Sean Barnes for the assistance in covering calls for service on the south and east sides of Madison. We, Little Monona, can't do that alone. So I took it upon myself to recruit other assistants from fabulous chiefs who didn't even question and sent resources. I think through some of this tragedy, I think we've seen that, of course, we'd be foolish not to identify areas of improvement as we do any incident or case. But I think it's worthy with such a tragedy that we can brag about some of the very wonderful things that happened where the community came together, and the larger Dane County community and beyond came together. We had, to your question on volunteers, there was abundance of volunteers, so much so that there was some, dispute over who was more qualified to do the volunteer work, right? So that's a good problem to have when you have that many amount of volunteers that come out with all different specialties and, comfort dogs and, therapists, et cetera, who come to Monona, but also, or come to aid in the incident. But also just the small gestures of the phone calls, the emails, the texts, and the folks who literally, I can only imagine what Madison received, but we were stuffed with food for like 2 days straight, with all the outpouring of support. And if there's a way to our heart, we love thank yous, but it's certainly the food. Speaking of wellness, my request would be more green stuff, more vegetables and things that'll keep us on this planet longer.
You can start to register.
We'll take any acts of any gestures like that. But so I just wanted to make sure all of you, on this committee, we're aware of that fact. It's not something that's been highly publicized, nor should it be. But as part of the healing process with our officers come the recognition of the work that they did and the sacrifices that they made that day and beyond. So any questions on that I'm able to share? It's not our investigation, so obviously I can't share.
But you're gonna do some level of assessment on how things might have gone better?
That's already occurring. And I think as human beings and professionals, we're always constantly looking to improve. And cops and probably firefighters are even to the nth degree in that sense. We're perfectionists, we want to do things right. And so some of the changes that we already looked into, the feedback that the officers gave me who responded were, Chief, we recently had this wonderful training that the fire department coordinated, the rescue task force training, where we had this large group come in and we Winnequa School opened up their doors and we did this after hours training and we had this full scale exercise. That was wonderful. Right, that the chief organized. And one of the things that we learned is the police can do things other than just stand there or, apply pressure. We have, thanks to the chief who did this himself, I believe. We each have these trauma kits, these go kits that have a variety of medical tools, trauma kits, tools that we can tend to the victims. What we discovered from feedback from the officers who were tending to these injuries, these very traumatic injuries, gunshot wound injuries, was that we need more. We need more. We need this packing wound. So the chief and I met on this, and as Chief McMullen does regularly, says, no problem, I'm gonna make that happen. And so things like that, Alder, we're already sort of working on, heaven forbid, right? When the next event happens, wherever it may happen, our officers want to feel like they're prepared and they have the tools which to do their job. And the whole point, when you respond to an active threat from the police angle, is to stop the threat. And that's a challenge for police officers, because that you're training officers, and there's been a shift in the past few years with the new philosophy and training on active shooters, for example. You're quite literally training officers to step over people. And that is not an easy and normal thing to do. But you have to stop the killing, right? And so officers, and when the fire department, we trained recently, and what we saw officers and their body cams do exactly that, is step over people until you identify that the threat has been stopped.
Wow.
Right? And I saw that bravery firsthand in these body cam images, but in their testimonies as well, as what they saw, what they did, what they wish they could have done more of, what tools they need to do their job better should they be called upon to do this the next time. And one of the big takeaways from that is the training paid off, but you also have to hire the right people to do that job. It's not for everyone, and I think Mark and I don't want to speak for you, Mark. I personally have seen instances in which, for a variety of reasons, people in my profession freeze. We saw some tragic examples in Texas of that, of a school shooting.
Yeah.
Your officers didn't hesitate, right? So that goes to the quality of the officers that you have here, and their character, and the fact that they are truly willing to sacrifice themselves to save others, and the training that you all have provided us. So the segue to that is, thank you for passing the referendum, and thank you to council, which has authorized additional training for your police and fire departments.
Okay.
Every budget cycle that I've been a part of here, I come to you and said, this is all we got. This is what and Mark, I think, made one reference, being a police officer his whole career, said, how many officers do you have to train? Isn't there 24 hours a year? You have to keep them, certified. Yes, Mark, this is all we get to train and certify 24 officers. And I don't know how my predecessor made it work. I frankly don't know how I managed to make that work. We as a team managed to make that work in the last 3 years. We were significantly under agencies like Cottage Grove, Oregon, communities relatively comparable to our size. We were under half of their training budget and what we were managing. You've now brought us back up, right? You will always hear me advocate for more if we need that. But what I'm telling you is that the money that you've allocated, specialty, $15,000 that the council has allocated for just us, will now afford us the ability to get all department training for a full day. So every member of this department will be able to train together for the first time in the history of this department. We will be able to bring in specialists like crisis intervention specialists, or diversity, equity, inclusion specialists, things we couldn't normally be able to afford. We'll now be able to bring them in a classroom setting, in a professional setting, and have good quality training, but also tactical training. We'll be able to do more of that. We'll be able to actually train the less lethal tools that the council and you all have recommended to provide us, and council has authorized us to purchase. Before we were wondering, okay, if we have these tools, how are we going to afford to train on them? The training costs money. So now, just give you a couple examples of what I think is going to be a very successful training year for us, and that we're going to be able to respond to both big events and small events much better than we previously had. And I'm proud of the work that we were already doing. I'm just a little bit more confident in our ability to respond to some of these things, given the additional resources that you all have recommended and council has given us with the blessings of a past referendum that is done.
Yep.
So, I'll wrap up here because I can go, as you all know, on and on and on. We update to our personnel. We have a new officer. Thank you to one of our commissioners here for being a part of that process. Jared Bello, he's a brand new police officer with us, but not brand new in terms of his experience. He comes by way of Sun Prairie Police Department. They are a partner agency. I always hate to steal good talent from partner agencies. I like the fact that all of our suburban partner agencies have good qualified police officers here in Dane County. And I also enjoy my relationship with my counterparts as chief. So it becomes a little tricky when you sort of quote unquote steal talent. But this one, I've said this publicly elsewhere. The outgoing chief who hired Officer Bello told me that he is one of his best hires and is truly a rock star. And sometimes you hear that from people you don't really know because of what I'll consider professional offloading, right? This is not the case. The Officer Bello comes with a very wonderful background, both in his personal life and personal experiences. A young family individual who has experience in the United States Naval Reserve as an intelligence analyst and is a wonderful has a wonderful track of patrolling in our community by way of Sun Prairie. And so he's in his third or fourth week of field training at this point. There's an accelerated process for experienced officers. They don't need the basic, here's how you turn on your, police siren, et cetera. So he's going to be going through an accelerated process and so far has been doing quite well. I introduced him to council yesterday. Couldn't make it today, but at some point when he's working the afternoon shift and it coincides with a public safety meeting, as you all know, I'm not shy about dragging some of those folks in here to introduce themselves. So I plan to do that. So, and then lastly, a couple of things. Equipment wise, just going back briefly, one of the things that council has approved in the capital budget was the acquisition of a all-electric vehicle that I will be assigned. Well, I'm assigning myself to it. It's for an administrative vehicle. It's an all-electric Blazer. There are currently, well, at the time we test drove it, there were two in the state, one in Superior, Wisconsin, utilized by the Superior Police Department, and the other was the dealerships, right, that they were using as a demo. We went our fleet lead, who happens to be our detective, went out and test drove it in Oconomowoc. At the reason you go there is because it's Ewald, and Ewald has a state bid for contracted police purchases, police vehicle purchasing, sorry. And that's a wonderful vehicle. It is a powerful vehicle. And it's probably appropriate that the chief of police is the first person to test drive this thing to see if it works for us, because it's instant torque, instant power. If you've ever driven an all-electric vehicle like a Tesla or an F-150 Lightning, it is a pretty peppy car. So, but more importantly, it's got huge brakes. It's got like Corvette brakes. So good accelerating power, good stopping power, and it is specifically designed for police. So you have the bigger brakes, beefier suspension system, et cetera. So
You get the charging station?
we will be, thank you. The question was, did we get the charging station? Because it's an all electric vehicle. We will be installing that as soon as I get wind that this vehicle has a VIN number. Because with manufacturing vehicles, and you all have heard it from me before, you never know when you're going to see it. We were told by the dealership they anticipate first quarter 2025. So that's from now to end of April.
Okay.
And as soon as I get wind that there's an actual vehicle identifying number associated with that car, that means that it's in process. It's being produced. I'll coordinate a second electric vehicle charging station right out here inside the police department. So
level 2, I assume.
level 2. We did research on level 3. with Brad Brunn, and that is a process and a power consumption item that the city is not, I don't think, equipped to deal with right now, especially when in terms of looking at potentially building a new building, potentially. So that the level 3s are standalones. Typically, you can't draw a power source from this building. It needs to be separately metered, and just to power one vehicle in which your chief is taking to and from meetings and going to scenes and going to and from home, I think is a bit much. So it's going to be a level 2.
Do you have any range anxiety concerns with, say, a long-term emergency sort of situation?
I have range anxieties, yes, in my gas powered vehicle that you give me. It never gets below 1/4 tank. Fortunately, it uses the way it's designed, it's using the LEDs that we use in our vehicles and the batteries that are in the new laptops now. There's little worry that it's going to consume the power of the vehicle if sitting idle. Where you run into issues if your heat's on full blast and the car's sitting for 2 hours and it's wintertime, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more attention to it. But we do have a vast network of EV charging stations throughout Wisconsin, throughout the area, and you give me a purchasing card to utilize. So I'm gonna have to get over that a little bit. And talking to Madison has several Teslas and they utilize for their detective cars. They're having some issues with that, as we talked about, in terms of how it interacts with their lighting systems. This Blazer is specifically designed with that in mind. And so it's not going to take a 100% draw from the source that's powering the vehicle. There's sort of assigned draws from the vehicle, from the auxiliary power versus the powering of the car. If that makes any sense. And I'm not an engineer, so. Okay.
Well, yeah, and it just feels like more of a leap to go from an admin car to day-to-day cars on that sort of thing.
100%. And some agencies, and I think that's what the Chevrolet is trying to push, are going with that to put them in as a patrol vehicle. I will tell you that the space in the rear of the vehicle is limited, how we set up our cars. And so I don't think that's good, for example, when you're conveying somebody to Winnebago Mental Health on a ED conveyance, because you have even more, like it's a tighter space than our Explorers, right? So I think it's a perfect car for an admin vehicle. And as I committed to council, and I'll do with you all, if this works out, the goal is from here on out, any administrative vehicle, detectives, the assistant chief, the lieutenant, we're all going to be driving electric vehicles. So it was sort of a mandate that I turned into an opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, it works for all of us. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, as you all, this is how I started with press releases, etc. It's been very, very busy at the police department, dealing with some very high risk situations. And I can't be more proud of your officer's ability to slow things down, to create space, to do their best to de-escalate, to bring in help with trained crisis negotiators if they themselves aren't comfortable. They're taking all the steps in the world to preserve life. I reminded them that in the process of taking those steps to preserve life, part of that means preserving their own. And so as much as we do our jobs to make sure that people who are armed with weapons that are threatening or displaying them, that we do our best to not force ourselves into situations in which we have to use lethal force. We also have to be cognizant, and I've reinforced with them that as wonderful and as awesome as that is, I also need you to go home at the end of your shift. That there's no exceptions to that. So that balancing act happens every day with these officers, and we're continuing to reinforce that. So as many of the wonderful successes that we've had with de-escalating armed subjects, and we've reached successful outcomes, it was one motion away from those incidents and not being the desired outcome, right? And I want everyone to know that your officers are being told, do their job, we trust your judgment, rely on your training, but you are so ordered that you're to come home at the end of every day. So, all right, that's it.
Thank you. I just want to compliment you on your press releases. It sometimes become the,
The novels that I write.
no, I mean, it becomes the newspaper article. It's like 90% they just take from you and put in the paper. So,
Thank you.
which is great. So they say what we want them to say, which is great.
Thank you. On that note, I've been asked to, I don't know what it is, people subscribe to our Facebook or something, if something's happening and around our area, our reporters are doing a good job, thanks, Ms. Hanson.
Oh, yes, Callie.
I've, I had several chiefs of police reach out to me from communities in Wisconsin I've never even heard of, and which is very wonderful. But I also say, we're unique here in Monona, and I love the fact that there's a faith and confidence in us as a police department and their police chief, but it takes work. You can't just do this overnight. It takes that trust and collaboration takes time. I didn't do this on day one. Starting here, Joe knows this. All of you know this. And so I think that more communication, as much as you can give it early and often, and I think I even said this in my interview process, is how I operate. And if I can't give you something, it's because it can't. And I think our fatal crash from January 1st, 2024 was a prime example of that. I want to be able to provide you this, but however, doing so, I would break the law by obstructing somebody else's investigation, right? So as much as I can continue to write and give information out to the public, that's what you're gonna see. I think there's no such thing as too much information when it comes to this.
But it's very well written, and like I said, it's almost the bulk of what I see in the newspaper comes right from.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So, police and fire division.
Yeah, Jerry touched on the main update. We'll be meeting on February 24th for the fire hiring process, and that's the only update I have.
Okay. Our next scheduled meeting is February 26th, so we'll talk more about the emergency plan at that point. And I suspect we'll have some more updates from our chiefs. Anything else people want to get in for the good of the order? All right, well, thank you all for coming out and thank you for patching in. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
That was Connie.
Oh,
If that's
I'll second
okay.
it.
Yeah.
First, and then we got it.
Okay, I do.
Lost today.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, thank you all.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You all have a good night.
Thanks, Jerry. Take care. Safe travels.
Thanks to all.